Hello and welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. As the number of MERS cases continues to rise, President Park Geun-hye emphasizes the need to ease public anxiety with measures to minimize the negative effects of the outbreak. One way would be resume business activities. After the opposition party agrees to change the wording in a revised parliamentary law from demand to request, the law is ready to be sent to the cabinet for the president's signature. On the 15th anniversary of the June 15th joint declaration, North Korea expressed optimism for inter-Korean talks. But their proposal comes with some preconditions, such as halting regular military exercises between Seoul and Washington. Let's start with the MERS outbreak in Korea. It's still showing few signs of slowing down. 5 more cases were confirmed overnight, with 2 additional deaths reported. We now go over to our Connie Kim at the news center for more. Connie, give us the latest.
Daniel, the health ministry said 4 of the newly confirmed cases are from hospitals where MERS patients are receiving treatment. Now, one is a healthcare provider who did CPR on a MERS patient just before the patient died. Now, what's alarming is that 3 of the 5 new cases are patients who caught the virus from patients with tertiary infections, raising concerns this will lift the number of MERS cases. Of the 5 new confirmed cases, 1 is from Konkuk University Hospital, the first case to be detected there. Now, regarding the 2 MERS patients who passed away, 1 had been suffering from diabetes and 1 had a bad liver but no special disease. Now, the death toll could rise even further as 17 MERS patients are reported to be in critical condition. Health officials had said last week was a critical turning point for containing the outbreak, but with 360 additional people put into quarantine overnight, we will have to keep monitoring the situation.
Well, Connie, Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul announced a temporary suspension of all non-emergency services until June 24th. And the health ministry said this morning that a task force is working around the clock at that hospital. What more can you tell us about the situation?
Yes, Daniel. In a press briefing this morning, the health ministry said a 24-member team is being deployed to Samsung Medical Center to work on containing the virus. Now, this center is the largest source of MERS infections in the country. Gyeongsang University Hospital in Daejeon also started a temporary partial shutdown after one of its nurses tested positive for the virus. Earlier in the morning, 2 other hospitals in Seoul announced temporary partial shutdowns. Korea Cancer Center Hospital and Porame Hospital also announced they are shutting down their emergency rooms temporarily after finding out that people with MERS visited the ERs. In addition to those 3, Mediheal Hospital and Changwon SK Hospital have closed temporarily after MERS patients were found to have had contact with hundreds of people there.
Now, amid the growing number of MERS cases, there are fears of the virus spreading all the way to the southern port city of Busan. I hear this week will be critical in containing the outbreak there. Give us the details on that.
Well, health officials in Busan have raised the possibility that patient 143 could be a super spreader in the region. After having contact with a MERS patient at a hospital in Daejeon, the 31-year-old started showing MERS symptoms after returning to Busan on June 2nd. Now, the problem is the person had contact with nearly 780 people at a handful of hospitals and small clinics before being isolated in a hospital ward last Monday. Officials say it takes about 5 to 7 days before people start showing symptoms, which is why they say this week will be a critical point for Busan. Now, until now, 6 regions have been affected by the virus, but the fear is that the disease could spread quickly in Busan, Korea's 2nd largest city. And despite the concerns about MERS, schools in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province resumed classes today. The schools say the increase in MERS cases has slowed down and that the closure is affecting their curriculum. About 440 schools nationwide are still closed after more than 2,900 schools temporarily halted classes last week. Back to you.
Thank you for that report, Connie. Moving on, President Park Geun-hye says minimizing the negative effects of the MERS outbreak is as important as eradicating the virus. At a meeting of her senior secretaries today, President Park urged the business community to resume their activities and encourage Korea's overseas missions to promote the government's efforts to contain the virus and to ease the anxiety about traveling to Korea. She talked about the need for a systematic response for handling new infectious diseases, adding that a task force of experts should become a core body that handles infectious diseases for the country at all times. On Sunday, the president visited Dongdaemun Market in Seoul, where she assured both Korean and foreign shoppers to feel safe about walking around in the city, since the authorities are doing everything they can to contain the virus. The MERS outbreak is having an impact on the way people shop, sending them online to shop as they try to refrain from outdoor activities. According to some experts, this phenomenon could take a toll on the Korean economy. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
Koreans are increasingly going online to shop for necessities, largely due to concerns about the MERS virus. Lotte Mart says its online sales from June 1st to the 11th increased around 27% from the same period last year. It also reported a near 62% rise in online orders during the same period.
The MERS outbreak may have played a role in the sharp increase, since we didn't engage in any promotional events during this period.
To keep up with rising demand, Lotte Mart says it added 100 delivery vehicles and dispatched some 150 people for home deliveries last week. eMart Mall and Home Plus say they've also experienced a boost in online sales and are coming up with similar plans for faster delivery. Still, concerns are rising the MERS outbreak will take a heavy toll on consumer spending as people refrain from outdoor activities. Cinema visits were down 52% this month through June 11th, while in-store sales in major department stores have dropped more than 5% from June 1st to 6th from the same period last year.
Poor handling of the MERS outbreak could kill the recovery momentum of the Korean economy, which is already struggling from a downward trend in industrial output in April and falling exports.
Just last week, the Bank of Korea trimmed its interest rate by 1 percentage point to 1.5% in an effort to minimize the impact of the MERS outbreak on economic sentiment. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, rival parties ended a standoff over a contentious parliamentary law and sent the final version to the cabinet on Monday. The opposition accepted the Assembly Speaker's proposal to change wording in the law that could be deemed unconstitutional. Ji Myung-gil tells us more.
National Assembly Speaker Chung Ih-hwa sent the final version of the revised parliamentary law to the cabinet for President Park Geun-hye's signature on Monday. The president now has 15 days to either sign or veto it. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Party cleared the way for the law to move on earlier in the day, when it agreed to change the most contentious language in the revised law by softening the wording. With the changes, the law will state that the Assembly can request instead of demand changes to government ordinances, including those made by the executive branch. The executive branch will then be allowed to consider the proposed changes and report back to the Assembly, rather than acting upon the request. The changes were proposed by the Assembly Speaker last week in an effort to mediate the situation, amid debate on the question of whether the law violates the Constitution. Prior to that, the president had threatened to veto the law, saying it could encroach upon her executive rights and paralyze state affairs. The NPAD had urged the presidential office to give serious consideration to the proposed changes, which give the executive branch more power to review parliamentary requests. Kim Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Staying on the political realm, wrangling over the confirmation of Prime Minister nominee Hwang Kyo-ahn is expected to rumble on this week as the floor leaders of the two main rival parties failed to reach agreement on the confirmation process. The ruling Saenuri Party aims to put Hwang's confirmation up for a vote by the full assembly before scheduled interpellation sessions start on Thursday. The party, which has a majority in the assembly, is even considering a unilateral vote if it fails to persuade the opposition parties to join in. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, which has said that Hwang is unfit for the post, demanded an apology from the nominee for failing to submit the requested documents at his confirmation hearing. The Liberal camp said his failure to submit the documents is reason enough to to disqualify him. Also at Monday's secretaries' meeting, President Park asked officials to seek ways to develop the bilateral relations with Tokyo ahead of the 50th anniversary of normalization of ties between the two countries later this month. She said this is necessary in addition to efforts to resolve the outstanding issues between them, such as Tokyo apologizing for the Japanese military's coercion of Korean women into sexual slavery during World War II. In Tokyo, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga refrained from commenting on President Park's recent interview with the Washington Post, in which she said Seoul and Tokyo had made considerable progress and are in the final stages of talks on the sex slavery issue. Suga added Tokyo hasn't changed its position that the matter was settled when the two sides agreed to normalize relations 50 years ago. Marking the 15th anniversary of a historic inter-Korean summit, North Korea says it has no reason not to hold talks with South Korea. Hwang Sung reports on Pyongyang's response and some expert analysis on the sincerity of the regime's gesture.
North Korea says it is open to talks with South Korea under the right conditions. In a statement carried by the state-run Korean Central News Agency on Monday, the North said there is no reason for the two Koreas not to hold dialogue and talks if an atmosphere for trust and reconciliation is created. It laid out some preconditions for dialogue, such as an end to the annual joint military exercises conducted by Seoul and Washington. The North's remarks coincide with the 15th anniversary of a landmark inter-Korean summit between former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-il. The summit produced the so-called June 15th Joint Declaration, outlining inter-Korean reconciliation and economic cooperation. South Korea also called for dialogue to mark the historic anniversary, but raised questions about North Korea's true intentions.
In our government's assessment, North Korea is stressing the June 15 Joint Declaration in words, but acting in the opposite way. We once again urge North Korea to actively create a mood for inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation according to the Joint Declaration.
Still, some experts view Pyongyang's latest statement as a positive development.
Since North Korea has put the ball in South Korea's court, future developments will depend on the South's response to the proposal.
But others remain wary about North Korea's intentions, noting that the statement came just a day after it test-fired short-range missiles into the East Sea. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
A North Korean soldier believed to be in his late teens defected to South Korea earlier today. South Korean authorities say he apparently walked across the DMZ, which is the heavily guarded military demarcation line between the two Koreas. Our Won Ji-hyun reports on this developing story.
It was around 8 o'clock this morning that a young soldier from North Korea was found on South Korean soil. An official from Seoul's defense ministry says the soldier in his late teens walked across the eastern side of the inter-Korean border to end up in Hwacheon of South Korea's Gangwon-do province. Although the soldier had crossed what's known to be one of the most heavily militarized zones in the world, the authorities said no fires were exchanged in the incident. But it did raise tensions on the border as South Korean troops prepare for a possible confrontation with the North during the crossing. The soldier expressed his will to defect through a South Korean guard post and told authorities that he wanted to escape the harsh reality in North Korea, which included regular beatings. Although hundreds of North Koreans try to flee their homeland every year, it is rare for them to cross the land border, as it's guarded by tens of thousands of soldiers on both sides. In fact, this was the first time in almost 3 years that a North Korean defector actually crossed the DMZ to get to the south. The young soldier from this morning is still under investigation. South Korean authorities said they will release more details on Tuesday. Won Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Shifting gears now, Korea's finance ministry says it will reach a decision soon on whether to draw up a supplementary budget to address the country's economic woes. Speaking to lawmakers at the National Assembly on Monday, Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan said a final decision will be made by the end of June, following an assessment of the current economic conditions. There have been mounting calls for a supplementary budget due to the sluggish economy, and the MERS outbreak. She added that while the impact of the outbreak on the economy has been minimal until now, the outbreak could pose a threat to the economy if it continues. In the world of sports, golf, that is, Korea's Park Inbee has written herself into the history books and regained her world #1 status with a resounding victory in her third straight KPMG Women's PGA Championship. Our Kim Hyun-bin tells us more.
Korean golf sensation Park Inbee showed off her skills for a record-breaking win. The 26-year-old shot a final round 68 on Sunday to finish the tournament at 19 under par at the Westchester Country Club in New York, taking home the winner's check of $525,000. She finished the season's second major 5 strokes ahead of fellow Korean Kim Se-young. Park is the third LPGA golfer to win 3 consecutive Women's PGA Championship titles. The other 2 title holders are Patty Berg and Annika Sorenstam. With the victory, her third this year, Park will also reclaim the #1 spot in the world rankings over top seed Lydia Ko. Park began the year at #1, but Ko surpassed her in February. Now with 6 major championship wins to her name, Park has surpassed her idol Park Se-ri for the most majors by a Korean player and tied the tour record for the lowest score in a major in relationship to par. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
That brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. Do join us at 10 p.m. Korea time for more.